He walked through the door at 2:15 with a woman I had never met. He introduced her as a colleague. I smiled. I said, "Welcome, I'm so glad you could make it." I meant every word, because what Damon did not know, what he could not have known because I had spent 4 months making sure he would not know, was that by 2:15 on the afternoon of our daughter's 7th birthday party, I had already done everything that needed to be done. The accounts were separated, the attorney had filed, the house was already in my name only, and in my pocket was a folded piece of paper with 11 sentences on it that I had written, edited, and memorized over the course of a Tuesday night 3 weeks earlier. All I had to do was wait for the right moment. Damon poured himself a drink and smiled at the parents gathered in our backyard and put his arm around the woman he had brought into our daughter's birthday party, and I watched him from across the yard, and I felt something I want to describe accurately. Not rage, not grief, the specific, quiet satisfaction of a woman whose preparation is complete and whose moment is arriving exactly on schedule. My name is Celeste, and this is the story of 4 months of silence, 1 birthday party, and 11 sentences that ended my marriage in front of every person Damon had ever wanted to impress. Welcome to Tessa Stories. If you're new here, before I tell you what those 11 sentences were, subscribe right now and turn on the bell, only if the stories move with you. Because what I did at that birthday party did not happen by accident. It was 4 months in the making. Stay with me. I want to start with my daughter. Her name is Lily, and she is the reason everything in this story happened the way it happened, and not some other way. When I found out about the affair, I had 2 choices about how to handle what I knew and when. The first choice was the immediate one, the confrontation, the explosion, the natural and understandable response of a woman whose marriage has just revealed itself to be something other than what she believed it was. The second choice was the deliberate one, the one that required me to hold something enormous for a long time in order to protect something more important. I chose the deliberate one because of Lily. I am going to tell you about her briefly, and then I am going to step back from her because she is 7 years old, and the details of her life belong to her and not to this story. What I want you to know is that she is the specific kind of child who makes you understand what the word fierce means in its best and most hopeful sense. She is curious and stubborn and has her grandmother's laugh, and she was the reason I stayed calm for 4 months when calm was the hardest thing available to me. I was not going to blow up my daughter's life because her father had blown up mine. I was going to do this right, on her terms, on my terms, on nobody else's. I found out on a Wednesday in February, not through a dramatic discovery, through the specific, mundane accumulation of small things that had been gathering for months and that finally, on a Wednesday in February, reached a weight I could not rationalize away. A name that appeared too frequently in too casual a context, a change in the texture of his evenings, the specific quality of a man who has somewhere else to be that he is managing the appearance of not having, the way he held his phone that had changed without announcement, the way he looked at me sometimes, not with guilt exactly, but with the specific assessment of a man who is calculating something. I had been noticing for months. On the Wednesday, I stopped noticing and started looking. I will not detail the specifics of how I found what I found, because the method is less important than the finding. What I found was sufficient. What I found was clear. What I found removed any version of events that left room for the innocent explanation I had been, until Wednesday, half hoping existed. Her name was Renee. It had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of Damon managing 2 lives with the specific, exhausting discipline of a man who has decided that what he wants is worth the management. I sat with what I had found for 3 days. I did not confront him. I did not change my behavior. I went to work, I came home, I made dinner, I put Lily to bed, I sat across from my husband at the dinner table, and I passed him the salt when he asked for it, and I asked about his day, and I answered when he asked about mine. I was building something, and I needed him to not know I was building it. On the fourth day, I called Sandra. I had been referred to Sandra by a friend who had used her for her own divorce 2 years earlier and who had described her in terms I remembered specifically. She is the person you want when you need someone who is 3 steps ahead of everything and completely without sentiment about the process. 3 steps ahead and without sentiment. That was exactly what I needed. I met Sandra at her office on a Thursday morning while Damon was at work and Lily was at school. I sat across from her and I told her everything. Not just what I had found, everything. The house, the accounts, the business Damon had started 4 years into our marriage that had been funded in part by assets we had built together. The retirement accounts, the investment portfolio, everything. Sandra listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "How do you want to handle this?" I said, "I want to be protected before he knows anything is happening. I want every financial decision that needs to be made before this becomes visible, and I want to choose when it becomes visible." She looked at me. "You want to control the timing?" "Yes." "Why?" I said, "Because he brought this into my marriage on his timeline without my knowledge or consent. I am going to end it on my timeline with full knowledge and complete preparation." Sandra said, "How much time do you need?" I said, "Lily's birthday is in 4 months. I want to be ready by then." She said, "Tell me why the birthday." I said, "Because he has been performing the role of devoted husband and father for 8 months while living a different life. I want the performance to end in front of the audience he has been performing for." Sandra looked at me for a long moment. She said, 4 months. I said, 4 months. She said, "Let's start." The 4 months were the most disciplined period of my life. I want to tell you about them honestly because I think the honesty matters, and because I think some of you who are in versions of this situation need to understand what controlled preparation actually requires. It requires you to be 2 people simultaneously. The person you are on the outside, the wife, the mother, the woman going through the ordinary motions of a shared life, and the person you are on the inside, quietly and methodically building the architecture of what comes next. Those 2 people cannot let each other show. Every evening I sat across from Damon at dinner, and I was the outside person. Every morning after he left for work, I was the inside person. I met with Sandra twice a month. I met with the financial advisor Sandra recommended, a woman named Patricia, who approached our shared finances with the specific, methodical precision of someone who has seen every version of this situation and knows exactly which numbers matter and why. Patricia found things. Not dramatic things, careful things. The specific, gradual things that a man does with shared finances when he is managing a second life that requires funding. Small redirections, expenses that had plausible explanations individually and a different explanation collectively. She documented everything. I signed the paperwork Sandra put in front of me in stages, each piece timed to the legal strategy she had built around our specific situation. The house transfer was the most complex and the most important. The house was jointly owned. Sandra's strategy for ensuring that the settlement reflected my contribution, financial and otherwise, required specific documentation built over time. She built it. By the time Lily's birthday was 3 weeks away, everything was in place. The accounts were protected, the filing was prepared, not submitted, prepared, ready to be submitted on Sandra's instruction. The house documentation was complete. I had one thing left to do. I sat down on a Tuesday night after Lily was asleep, and I wrote 11 sentences. I wrote them and I read them, and I edited them and I read them again. I thought about every person who would be in that backyard on Lily's birthday. Family, friends, the parents from Lily's school who had been in our lives for 3 years, the neighbors who had watched us as a couple and as a family, and who had, like everyone, been given the performance version of our marriage. I thought about Damon standing in that backyard with all of those people around him. I thought about what he would not be expecting. I memorized the 11 sentences. I put the paper in my pocket. I went to bed. You are more than halfway through this story. Subscribe to Tessa Stories right now if you haven't already, and drop your city in the comments. I want to know where you're watching from, because what happened at that birthday party is the part you have been waiting for. Stay with me. The morning of Lily's birthday, I was up at 6. I made her the breakfast she always asked for on her birthday, the specific, elaborate pancake arrangement that had become our tradition, with the fruit organized into the shape of a 7 because she was turning 7, and she had requested a 7 made of strawberries with blueberry eyes. She came downstairs in her pajamas and saw the pancakes and made the sound that 7-year-olds make when something is exactly what they wanted, and I held her in the kitchen in the specific, unhurried way of a mother who knows that this morning, this particular morning, is one she is going to remember for a long time. Damon came down at 7:30. He kissed Lily's head, he poured coffee, he looked at me over the rim of his cup and said, "Big day." I said, "The biggest." I smiled at him. He smiled back. He did not know. The party started at 1 o'clock. 32 people in our backyard, Lily's school friends and their parents, our neighbors, my sister and her husband, Damon's brother and his wife, my parents, Damon's mother. Damon's mother. I want to note that specifically because she matters to what came later. She arrived at 12:50 and hugged Lily and hugged me, and I held the hug a beat longer than usual, and she looked at me when I pulled back with the specific, searching look of a woman who has known me for 9 years and senses something she cannot name. I said, "I'm so glad you're here today." She said, "Are you all right?" I said, "I will be." She looked at me. I moved to greet the next arrival. Damon arrived at 2:15 with Renee. I watched him come through the side gate with her, this woman whose name I had known for 4 months, whose face I had seen in photographs, who had been in my marriage for 8 months without my consent. And I watched him scan the yard for me and find me, and I saw the calculation happen on his face. The rapid, practiced calculation of a man who is managing 2 contexts that have just merged unexpectedly and is deciding which version of himself to deploy. He deployed the easy one. He came to me. He said she was a colleague. He said he hoped it was okay that he had brought her. She didn't have plans, and he thought it would be fine. I said, "Of course, welcome." I looked at Renee directly. I said, "I'm Celeste, Lily's mom." She said, "She's adorable." I said, "She is." I smiled. I went to check on the food. The party moved through its rhythms. Lily ran and played and was 7 years old in the complete, uncomplicated way of a child whose birthday party is exactly what she wanted. I watched her from various points around the yard, and I let her joy be fully present in me alongside everything else I was carrying. Both things coexisted. The joy of watching my daughter on her birthday was real, and the weight of what I was about to do was real, and they occupied the same afternoon simultaneously. Damon circulated. He was warm with everyone in the specific social ease of a man who is good at parties. He kept Renee at a slight distance from me, the careful proximity management of someone who is managing a situation. He was watching me without appearing to watch me. I was watching him watch me. At 3:30, I helped carry out the birthday cake. The yard gathered around the table where Lily stood with her eyes wide and her face incandescent in the way of children about to be sung to. We sang, she blew out the candles, everyone clapped. Damon was on the other side of the table with his hand on Lily's shoulder, and he was smiling. And in that moment, in the specific, ordinary beauty of that moment, I felt the full weight of what he had thrown away. not what I was losing, what he had thrown away. I cut the cake. I served Lily first. I served every child. And then I straightened up and I looked at the yard full of people and I said, clearly, in the specific, carrying voice of a woman who has been to enough parties to know how to make a backyard hear her without shouting, before we all eat, I want to say something. The yard went quiet. Damon looked at me. I looked back at him. I smiled. I want to tell you the 11 sentences. I want to give them to you exactly as I said them because they are the center of this story, and they deserve to be exact. I said, 9 years ago, I married a man I believed in completely. I want to thank everyone here for being part of the life we built. The birthdays, the holidays, the ordinary Tuesdays that make a family. I also want to be honest with the people I love because I think honesty is the only foundation anything real can be built on. Damon has been in a relationship with the woman he brought here today for the past 8 months. I have known for 4 months. I chose today to say so not to ruin a birthday. Lily's party is over, and she is happy, and that is what matters. I chose today because Damon has been performing a life in front of the people in this yard for 8 months, and I wanted the performance to end where it has been performed. The divorce was filed this morning. I wish everyone here a safe drive home. Lily, baby, come with Mama. I held out my hand.
Lily looked at me. She did not fully understand what had just happened. She is 7, and the sentence about divorce was not one she had a complete framework for yet. What she understood was her mother's hand and her mother's face, which was calm and warm and entirely present for her. She came to me. I took her hand. I looked at Damon. He was standing at the birthday table with 32 people around him, and the expression on his face was the specific, total expression of a man whose architecture has just collapsed in the space of 11 sentences. Renee was beside him. She was not looking at him. She was looking at the ground. Damon's mother was looking at her son. I will not describe what was on her face, except to say that it told its own story and required no narration from me. I walked through the yard. People stepped aside. My sister fell into step beside me without a word. She had known. I had told her 2 weeks before because she was my sister and she deserved not to be ambushed at her niece's birthday party. We walked through the house. We walked out the front door. I had packed a bag for Lily and me 3 days earlier. It was in my sister's car, which was parked on the street. We got in. My sister drove. I sat in the passenger seat and I looked straight ahead and I breathed. Lily said, "Mama, are we having a sleepover at Aunt Diane's?" I said, "Yes, baby, a sleepover." She said, "Can we watch a movie?" I said, "We can watch whatever you want." She said, "Okay." She looked out the window. I looked out the window. My sister drove. I want to tell you what happened in the yard after we left. I know because my neighbor Carol, a woman who had been in my life for 6 years and who had sent me a message that evening that I read after Lily was asleep, told me. She said the yard was silent for approximately 30 seconds after I walked through the house. And then Damon's mother looked at her son and said 3 words. She said, "Get out now." Not to me, to Damon. She said it in the specific voice. Carol described it as the quietest, loud thing she had ever heard of a woman who has just watched her daughter-in-law walk out of a birthday party with her granddaughter's hand in hers, and who has understood, in the space of 11 sentences, everything she needs to understand about the past 8 months. Damon tried to speak. His mother said, "I said get out." He left. Renee had already left. The remaining guests, the neighbors, the school parents, the family friends, stayed and helped clean up. Carol told me they worked quietly and efficiently, and that Damon's mother stayed until the last table was folded and the last bag of trash was by the door. Then she sat in the backyard alone for a while. Carol gave her tea. She drank it. She left. She called me the next morning. She said, "I am so sorry, Celeste." I said, "You don't have to be sorry." She said, "I raised him. I am sorry." I said, "He made his choices. You didn't make them for him." She said, "Can I see Lily?"
I said, "Lily loves you. Nothing that happened changes that." She cried. I held the phone and let her cry because she deserved to, and because some things require crying, and this was one of them. The legal proceedings moved with the efficiency that Sandra's 4 months of preparation had made possible. Damon's attorney attempted several approaches. Each one met the specific, methodical documentation that Sandra and Patricia had built over 4 months. The house, the accounts, the business assets, the financial redirections Patricia had identified and documented. The settlement reflected the full picture. The house was mine. The financial settlement reflected the documented redirections. The money that had gone toward a second life over 8 months was factored into what came back to me. Damon signed, not happily, not without his attorney's extensive efforts to find a different outcome, but he signed. Because the documentation was complete, because Sandra had been 3 steps ahead for 4 months, because a woman who has been precise and patient and deliberate for 4 months is not a woman whose position collapses under pressure. What I want to give you from this story is not the 11 sentences. You could write your own 11 sentences. What I want to give you is what made them possible. The choice, the specific, enormous choice to take 4 months instead of 4 minutes, to build something real and lasting and protected instead of expressing something immediate and vulnerable. Every day of those 4 months, I could have confronted Damon. Every day of those 4 months, something in me wanted to. Every day, I chose the longer road instead. That choice is available to everyone. It is not easy. I will not tell you it is easy. It is the hardest kind of discipline, the discipline of holding something painful and continuing to function, and continuing to prepare and continuing to protect yourself while the pain is fully present. But it changes the outcome completely. Damon expected a reaction. He had been managing the possibility of a reaction for 8 months. He had been prepared, in the way that people who are doing something wrong prepare for discovery, for a confrontation. He had not been prepared for a woman who already knew, who had spent 4 months building an unassailable position, and who had chosen the moment and the audience with the specific deliberateness of someone who had been methodical about everything. He did not know that version of me existed. I did not fully know that version of me existed. I know now. Know your finances. Know your accounts. Know your legal position. The practical knowledge of your own financial situation is not unromantic. It is the most loving thing you can do for your future self. I knew our finances before the Wednesday in February, and that knowledge meant that when Patricia sat across from me and asked me what was in every account, I could answer her completely. That completeness is what made the 4 months possible. That completeness is what made the settlement fair. Know your numbers. And trust your instincts. I had been noticing for months before the Wednesday. I had been rationalizing what I noticed for months before the Wednesday. The noticing was accurate. The rationalizing was kind to him and unkind to me. There is a version of every one of those months I could have arrived at the truth sooner if I had trusted what I was seeing rather than explaining it away. Trust what you are seeing. Lily is well. I want to say that first and most importantly. She is 7 years old and she is fierce and curious and she has her grandmother's laugh and she is well. Children are more resilient than we fear and less unaware than we sometimes hope, and she has moved through the changes of the past months with the specific, honest adaptability of a child whose mother has been honest with her at every age-appropriate level. She asks questions. I answer them.
We are building something. She and I in the house that is now fully mine and hers. Something that is ours in the complete sense of the word. Not a lesser thing than what was there before. A different thing. A clearer thing. She still sees her father. I have been careful to ensure that my feelings about Damon do not become her feelings about her father, because he is her father, and that relationship is hers and belongs to her, and not to my marriage or its ending. That has required its own discipline, the discipline of a mother who loves her daughter more than she resents her ex-husband. It is ongoing work. I do it every day. I am well. I am in my house. I am building something. If you watched this entire story, thank you.
Thank you for staying all the way through, for sitting with the 4 months and the birthday party and the 11 sentences and the backyard after I left. Thank you for understanding that this is not a story about revenge. It is a story about a woman who chose precision over reaction and who protected herself and her daughter with 4 months of quiet, deliberate work. Drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you are watching from, your city, your country, wherever you are tonight. I read every single one. And tell me this, what are the 11 sentences you would say? Not to your husband, in general, the 11 sentences of your truest, most protected, most prepared self. Tell me in the comments. I want to read them. And tell me this, do you know your finances? Right now, today, do you know what is in every account with your name on it? This story is asking you to check, not tomorrow, today. If this story reached you, share it. One person, the one who is in month 1 of their own 4 months and needs to know that the preparation is worth it, that the long road leads somewhere real. Subscribe to Tessa Stories if you haven't already. Turn on the bell. Every week, a story like this one. Real, complete, told all the way through. I love you. Choose the deliberate path. Build the unassailable thing. And when the moment comes, stand up, smile, say the 11 sentences. Then take your daughter's hand and walk out. I did. The door closed behind us. The rest was already handled. I'll see you in the next one.